I want to automatically update the DOM as soon as we receive a response from our server. Therefore, what we're going to be doing is emitting an event to the parent, just like we did when we were creating the lesson, and our parent is going to automatically take care of the rest. So before we do that, let's close this modal and emit that event. The name of this event is going to be lesson updated, and the payload that we're going to be sending to our parent is going to be response.data. Then in our lessons.view, which is the parent, we can listen to that event by subscribing to it, and we can receive the payload in here in a variable called lesson. And when we receive this, we want to find that lesson using its ID in this lessons array, and then we want to automatically replace it with this response that we got from the server. So let's get the index, and we'll be searching the lessons array on this parent, and we'll be using JavaScript's find index method. And if you don't know about this method, this is a simple method that JavaScript provides for us. And what it's gonna do is it takes in a closure, and it's gonna try to find any element in the current array that matches the condition that is placed in that closure. And if it doesn't find any, then it's going to return -1, but if it finds, it's going to return to us the index of that element. So we'll look through all of them, and we have the current object in that array in this variable L. So return lesson.id equals L.id. So we are looking for a lesson where the IDs match. Okay, now if we get that index, what we're gonna do is we're going to replace this lesson with the one that we have in the lessons array. This.lessons dot splice, and the splice method will take in the index, the number of elements we want to remove, and what to replace at that position. So the lesson. Okay, that should do the trick. Let's go ahead and see how this works in our browser. And we're simply going to attach edited at the end of the title so we know it's actually edited. Save lesson. It's closed, and there we go. We have edited right there. So it means it's correctly finding that lesson and replacing it. Now, just for a tip, if you're trying to update your lesson by simply saying this.lessons and passing in the lesson index and replacing it with the lesson, this is not going to work very well with Vue.js, and the recommended way to do that is using the splice method. Okay, so that's a little gotcha that you might be struggling with, but that doesn't work well with Vue.js. Now I'd like us to notice something. When we click on the create new lesson button, yeah, we still have this data in our modal, and we actually have a save lesson button here rather than the button we specified in our code. So let's handle that. The reason is we are not telling the modal that we are resetting editing to false. Therefore, what we're going to do when we listen to that create lesson, we're going to set this.editing to false, and we have to clear this data. So I don't want to go through the cycle of this.description equals empty string, this.video ID equals this. Therefore, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to simply refactor this into a class. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is defining a lesson class, and this lesson class is going to take in a lesson, and it's going to set properties on this class that match that lesson. For example, this.title equals lesson.title, and if no lesson.title exists, we're going to assign it to an empty string. This.description equals lesson.description, or empty string. This.video ID equals lesson.video ID, or an empty string. And finally, this.episode number equals lesson.episode number, or an empty string. And that's a simple lesson class that is going to help us refactor our code. Now, how do I want to use this? When I listen to a create new lesson event, I'm going to set this.lesson equals new lesson. Okay, and it means I need a lesson property on this class, and a lesson property is all of this: title, description, episode, and video ID. Therefore, I'm going to replace all of this with lesson. Okay, so when we listen to create new, this.lesson is going to be a new lesson. Therefore, it's going to be empty, and we should actually pass an empty object right there. Okay, so it's going to be empty with all of these empty strings. Then right here where I have title, description, video ID, I'm going to replace all of this with this.lesson equals new lesson. and would pass in the lesson into the constructor. Okay, and I also need to remove the episode ID. Then we'll set the series ID and lesson ID on this class. Also, when we are making our post request to create a lesson, we can now remove all of this and pass in this.lesson. And also, when we are making that put request, we can now replace all of this with this.lesson. Okay, so the only way to know if we've actually broken anything is to try it out, right? So let's go ahead and try. Yeah, and looks like we already have a bunch of errors. Title is not defined on the instance, and that would be because we have vmodel title, vmodel video ID, and all of that. So we want to replace this with lesson.title, lesson.video ID, lesson.episode number, and finally lesson.description. Save that, refresh again, and that clears up our errors. Let's check out our view tools. And we have an empty lesson object right here, right? So let's click on edit. It populates that object with the data. Let's edit a lesson by adding edited right here and reducing the description. Save lesson. And look at that, nothing was broken. So we actually had a successful refactor. Now, if we click on the create new lesson button, everything is initialized back to an empty string. So I think that actually works strangely perfectly. Let's go ahead and create a lesson to make sure nothing is broken. Create lesson button. Okay, so there we go, we have a lesson. If we hit on the edit button, we have that data, and if we also hit on the edit button, it automatically is parsed. Awesome, so that looks like it's working perfectly. I'm gonna hit pause for a second and we're gonna continue in the very next video.